state.
Florida. I've got a cousin in Florida. I think they're expecting a rainstorm today too, or if it hasn't already started.
Yeah, we've got wet weather up here in Canada. Mm-hmm.
I think we had a flood warning this morning too. I don't know if it'll be anything crazy, but
Oh gosh.
I saw it this morning when I was leaving.
Oh gosh. This is the season.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right?
Yeah, where are you guys located in Canada?
Our office is about an hour west of Toronto, a town called Waterloo. It's where RIM started, BlackBerry. There's a couple other big tech companies here. Google's got a decent sized office downtown Kitchener as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on Lake Ontario, the east or west side.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, I think we've still got people joining us, so we'll just give it another couple of minutes here. We're not quite 2 o'clock yet.
Yeah.
Has anybody in the chat, if you want to add any hot topics or things that you wanted to learn about today from Roger? He's got a couple properties he's going to show us. We're going to walk you through his process, kind of give you the inside scoop on how he uses technology to really advance his services and the benefits, obviously, some of his processes, tips, tricks, and all of those pieces, but he's an amazing resource, so please use him while you're here. I'll be managing the chat for him, so if you have questions as we go through, please add them in there. We love to keep this conversational. It's all for your benefit, so whatever we can do to help, we're happy to.
Yeah, so it's a couple minutes before it starts, where it's just a little awkward silence. You got to listen to us, but we'll get into it.
All good.
We've got a great crowd that signed up with us today, so I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah. During this too.
Probably, yeah. It's really interesting to see in that one demo property, Roger, how the fire impacted like the different floors.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes people think like when you see something like that, it's just so isolated, but it actually that's like across the entire building. You saw the smoke damage and all of those pieces and all of the details that were.
Yeah, that was a heck of a big fire. Oh my gosh. I couldn't believe how big that was.
I like that example that you shared, and you're going to share with the group here today, because that one wall that's exposed to the exterior there's barely anything, and the drafters look like they got that right along the side where it was right.
Yeah, I've always been impressed with your guys, with the drafters that you guys have, because they make some pretty good blueprints off of some sometimes terrible scans on my part.
No, we won't say terrible scans on your part. It's probably just the damage.
Just the scenario. Yeah, it's the situation I'm in. You know, it's always impressive, but it always comes out really well. And I've rarely ever had to adjust anything.
Oh, good to hear.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll share that. They love to hear that.
Perfect. All right. We'll wait maybe 30 seconds here and get started.
Maybe that sounds like a good plan.
Some people might join in as we go, but we won't wait too long for all of you who are already here. We won't keep you waiting.
I'm excited. We got lots to talk about today. So I know. I love it when we have good demo properties as well, because it just makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
All right, Charlene, you want to kick us off?
Are you ready? All right. So thanks for joining us today, guys. We kind of had sort of a preamble and a bit of a chat, looking to understand where everybody's coming from. So housekeeping wise, if you have a comment or you have a question, please add it in the chat below. You'll see the little icon with the 2 bubbles. I'll be managing the chat, and I'm happy to share that with either Roger or Jordan as we go through the conversation today. We're joined by one of our clients and customers, Roger Thorpe, and he is with a CFI with Joe Myers Investigations in New York City. He's been kind enough to join us, and he's going to show us a couple of properties today. So we're going to walk through a commercial space as well as a residential space, just talk about what his process is, how he uses the technology to be able to assess, and then obviously address and create the reports that he does. And he uses those across, I won't speak for him, across for different purposes based on what he needs in terms of his clients. Jordan is also with us today. He's one of our sales managers here at iGUIDE. And Roger and Jordan, I'll let you just maybe give yourselves a brief introduction. Jordan, do you want to go ahead, and then we'll pass it over to Roger?
Sure, of course. Yeah. So I'm Jordan Van Haster. I've done a few webinars, so thank you for those who've joined who recognize me, or maybe we've met at a trade show before, specifically in the insurance and restoration division. So, I mean, today's topic will involve fire investigation, which is definitely under that insurance and restoration market. I also deal with a lot of adjusters, public and independent restoration contractors, and then you get into some of the engineering and forensic engineering as well in that. So it's great to be here. And Roger, thanks again for joining us. I'll open up the floor to you. Let you tell everyone who you are.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. My name is Roger Thorpe. I'm a fire investigator. Full-time, I'm a career fireman. Started out in Maryland as a fireman, and then got into the fire investigation side of things, primarily private sector. So I deal with insurance companies, attorneys, anything where there's subrogation potential. That's my bread and butter. Licensed in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. I've done a lot of work in Maryland, DC, Delaware, pretty much up and down the East Coast, for all the major insurance agencies, some big time attorneys in the city and around the city. And yeah, this is kind of like my job on my days off from my firehouse job, and then my future retirement plan to do this full time when I retire from that. So yeah.
Oh, you're a busy guy. We appreciate you taking the time to connect with us today.
Certainly.
Roger. Exciting. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about, Roger's been kind enough to give us some details. We're going to talk about the latest trends and best practices, of course, some new versus traditional, and then as well how he's finding efficiency with the technology, and then love to have a great discussion about looking at the future. So Roger's going to share his ideas and where he sees things going. Love for that to be interactive, so please drop your comments, any questions you have within the chat, and we'll be happy to incorporate them into today's discussion. So ready to kick this off, Roger?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the industry, where you see it's progressing, your experience,
Sure.
and otherwise.
Yeah, I apologize off the head if guys and gals in here are not sure the difference, but there's really two differences in fire investigators. There's a public sector, typically those who work for a sheriff's department or a fire department, and their main goal is to look for a crime. Was it an arson or some kind of a for-profit crime, or maybe to cover up a crime? And once they pretty much eliminate that as a potential, they've ruled that, hey, there's no arson here on this fire scene. They pretty much wipe their hands of it, and they're done with the fire scene. They don't have the budgets and the time to really dive in, or really the reason to dive in deep into fire scene examinations beyond a crime. That's where the private sector investigators come in, and that's primarily what I do. Private sector, like if anyone's ever had a house fire or a car fire or any kind of insurance claim, you call your insurance company, you file a claim, and they will typically send an adjuster out to take a look, adjust, put a value on everything and whatnot. More often than not, they will also hire a fire investigator like myself from the private sector, and we will do origin and cause determination. Private sector has the deeper pockets, for lack of a better term. I have the pockets of the insurance company to use. So if I say, hey, I need to pull evidence or bring in an electrical engineer or a mechanical engineer, typically the insurance says, yeah, whatever you need, you do what you think is best. And my main goal is to not only look for, pretty much double check the public sector to make sure there wasn't a crime, but also look for any subrogation potential. Things like a faulty dryer that was not produced well or manufactured properly. And we need to not only, make sure that the Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, is aware and can notify the public, but also make sure the company fixes the problem and go after them for damages. Damages, any insurance company is always looking to recoup their losses. That's just how insurance works. So really what that has to do as far as my job is I have to be very thorough. I have to, document a fire scene. I have to get all interested parties involved. And I need to really be very thorough on who I interview, everyone I interview, how I interview them, how you document the fire scene, and really just hit all the bases that we need to hit, and then provide that to the insurance company and ultimately the attorneys for the insurance company to make the determination of whether or not there's a case, who we need to notify, who needs to be put on notice, what interested parties need to be involved moving forward. And that can be pretty simple sometimes if it's a single family house with, one insurance carrier and no one else. Or if it's an office building or an apartment complex that has 15, 20 residents who have, all different insurance carriers or even the same insurance carriers, but different parties involved. It can get very time consuming and messy coordinating all that. So what I like to do is documentation. It's key to what we do. NFPA, which is our guide. Everyone calls it a guide, but it's used in courts every day. It's in reality, it's what we have to do. But NFPA is very strict and very thorough on examining and describing what constitutes a good fire investigation, and part of that is documentation. That can do with photography, video. If you're willing to do video, a lot of people don't like doing it because of the audio in the background. But really still photography is the best thing. And now with this new 360 scans and 360 scans with LiDAR, it's a game changer. And it's really helps us document the fire scene, take measurements, and also relay our information to the courts, the attorneys, those that are not really understanding fire investigation, firefighting, who somebody like myself might understand a little bit better or have an idea of what they're looking at or thinking about when someone describes a fire scene to me. So this is a huge game changer as far as relaying that information and, potentially using it in court as well.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, we talked a little bit before, we met for the webinar today, just about some of the traditional methods that, like, when you were in court, or what were some of the challenges that you came across before, I would say, like, using the technology and having to use those traditional methods? Like, we're looking at traditional methods now. Like, can you speak to what your experience was there and maybe how much time was invested in that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, traditionally, going back 20 years, I remember older guys in this industry and girls that were using 35mm film cameras to document fire scenes. Some of them in black and white photo. I mean, that's way before me, but still 35mm film.
Yeah.
You snap a photo on a fire scene and you're hoping that you relayed the information that you're trying to document well without seeing it instantly. Fast forward to digital cameras. Sure, I can take hundreds of photos on a fire scene, and I normally do. Everything from starting on the exterior of the building, and then traditionally what I do is I start on the exterior and I work my way towards a fire. Least damage to most damage. Documenting that and then relaying it to courts and attorneys and potential jurors is difficult, especially for jurors who have no idea. They've never had a fire before. They've never seen a fire before, as far as a house or a building.
Yeah.
And then explaining to them how you got to your determination of origin and then cause. We can't have a cause of a fire without determining the origin properly and then relaying that information. So to be able to document it with digital cameras, yeah, that works. And every time I've been in court, it's typically, I'll do a photo slideshow and I'll say, here's an exterior of the building.
Yeah.
Here's a 360 shot of the building I did with my digital camera, and I'll punch through the slides. And then I'll say, all right, let's walk through the front door and work our way towards the fire scene. I may not show a photo of every room in the house. I may go from the front door through the kitchen to the living room to a bedroom.
Right.
And that'll show progression. That'll show more damage, more soot lines, more smoke damage. And that paints a picture for the jury and the attorneys and the courts of, yeah, we're working towards the most damaged area of this property.
Yeah.
That works most of the time. It always has. But to then relay the ability to do 360 photos and then stitch them together, that just paints a better picture. Most people, including myself, are very visual people. I have a hard time imagining things when someone explains something to me. So I'm always say, I'm a visual guy, show it to me. And so before the 360 camera system, I would take multiple photos and then I would stitch them together, or try to stitch them together to make them work better, and then make that kind of pre-VR look for somebody to look at, a panoramic photo of a house or a room. And it works for the most part, but it's never seamless. It's always a pain. It takes time to get it right. If you're not using a tripod, good luck getting the photos to match up really well. But it's doable. And 90% of people in this industry are still doing it that way because they haven't taken the jump, or they're not fully aware of the capabilities of the technology out there that's progressing, and is every day progressing to be better and better and provide just a better way of relaying this information to people. And that's really what is key. It lacks a lot of context using the old methods. And now that I have this new method, it's a night and day difference. It's a game changer. I can relay information so easily, do a broad picture, zoom in, take measurements, you name it. And it also preserves the evidence in the photos for me. So if there's ever an issue of spoliation, I have a living document that I can move around inside of and look at more closely than a single photograph.
And Roger, before you joined with iGUIDE as well, you mentioned you were doing digital photos and probably quite a few of them having to sort after and create that slideshow. Did you have to, like back in the traditional methods, have to create floor plans and stuff like that to kind of give the outline of the building as well, or was it mainly for photo documentation?
Sure. In addition to traditional methods of just photography, NFPA requires us to do scene sketches. I'm no artist. The invention of the iPad was a huge game changer for me in this industry, having an Apple Pencil and whatnot. But traditionally before that, it was pen and paper, a tape measure. If you were smart, you got a laser measurer to do quick lasers, measurements of a room. But you're still ultimately getting in there with a tape measure and you're measuring, distance between the wall and the window, or the length and width of a window, or the height and width of a window, doorways, distance to evidence markers. And you would relay that to pen and paper. Some guys would then relay that back to graph paper to make it look better. Or they would find some rudimentary software like I used to do back in the day and plug in my measurements and make a kind of a junky looking blueprint. And then I would add a couch or a lamp, whatever I needed to kind of relay that information, and then add in my measurements. And it worked, but it's never that great looking. And that goes in, I used to do that with the photography. So I'd say, here's a photo, here's a blueprint overall of the room of origin. When it gets really hard is when you have to, blueprint a room, but hey, I want to paint a bigger picture. I need to blueprint the entire house. Well, I'm spending an entire day now sketching a house, room to room, hallways. Fire investigators, they always learn in the very beginning, put not to scale on your documents. That always prevents you from potential issues in the courts of not having everything measurement-wise be perfect. And I always did that, but it annoyed me because I know my measurements could be better. I still put not to scale to be safe, but I want the measurements to be much better than I can ever do with a tape measure and laser. So those two are really the biggest things: is photography and scene sketches by hand, whether pen and paper or iPad and pencil. And they work, but they're still not as good as we could be and what technology is going to provide for us.
Yeah, exactly.
You ready? I want to see, I'm anxious because I want to hear from your perspective, like
Okay.
what these sample properties look like. So I know you have both a residential and a commercial
Yep.
property, and
All right.
we've got those anonymized, so we're not sharing any personal information or
Yeah,
business
no
information
worries.
in there. So
I'll give a rundown. So the first one,
yeah,
let me see.
yeah, we'll just give you a sec there.
No worries.
Just share your
Let's see.
screen.
Outside shots. All right.
This was, it was interesting.
Google
Myself, I've
Chrome.
never really seen a property that's been impacted by fire before, so it was interesting for me. And I'd also love to hear, Roger, like, what are some of the details that you're really paying attention to? So you're taking the technology and you're using it, like, what is it you're trying to capture as you're going through this? Like, I would love to hear from your perspective what's really important.
Absolutely. So this is a fire in Long Island I did. This was 2 years ago, I believe. I don't get a lot of information typically when I do fire investigation. I get an assignment. Hey, we have a house fire. Either they may say we don't know what it is, or they might say, hey, the insured is saying it's their bicycle caught fire, an e-bike, so to speak.
Okay.
I typically prefer not to get too many details. I don't want to be, leaning in one way or the other without, my own first impressions. So this was a house fire. Looks pretty good from the outside. I always do a 360 photograph from the outside. Every investigator I've ever talked to does as well, within reason. If it's New York City, you can't get all four sides. That's a whole nother story. But I always start with the outside. I typically will use the iGUIDE to do the 360 outside, even though it doesn't produce blueprints of the outside. That's not a concern. I just want it to be able to look around, look around the neighborhood. You never know when you get a question from an attorney who says, where's the closest fire hydrant? And I can go, oh, I'll look. I don't see one within reason.
That's a good
Typically not. But as I go, I'll photograph around the building. Sorry if I'm going too fast. And this is just overall photos. So I see no damage on the front. We have some boarded up damage or boarded up window at the top. And as I go right around the back, we start to see some more boarded up areas. In the grand scheme of things, this is not a terrible fire. The house is still standing. As we get inside, you'll see that a lot of the house is still intact and a lot of the personal belongings are still intact. But here we have two windows that are locked off. Here's a close-up I did. And then we work around the back. And here's all their stuff from remediation. So coming back to the front now with our menu down here on the left.
Yep.
We can look closer and say, all right, I need to go inside. So here's the main floor. And here's the blueprint that iGUIDE produces for me from my scans.
That's cool.
And then we can walk through this house essentially and say, if we were in court right now and I was explaining this to a jury, I'd say, well, here's the foyer. This is leading to the house. As we walk in, we can see the kitchen's intact. Not a lot of damage. The blurred out sections are, in this case, were remediation company people. I try and do scans with nobody visible. It just makes it easier to not have to blur them out. But sometimes you can't do that. So you work your way around it.
Which is a new feature. So if anyone on here doesn't know about that, feel free to throw some questions in.
Yes,
I
remember
a big feature that a lot of people have been asking for. So it is finally here. We've got automated and manual blurring options. Sorry to interrupt, Roger.
No, I was going to say I was one of the guys definitely that was pushing for blurring options because of this problem I was having where people would be getting in my scans. So we come into the living room, and now we come into the hallway. And here we see more soot damage, smoke damage. You can see the cobwebs that have collected soot. And here's photos on the left wall that have been removed, but they show that there were indeed photos there. That's one of the telltale signs that we can, I shouldn't say telltale. One of the things I look for to see if maybe it was an arson. People will sometimes take their photos off the wall or remove their clothing from their closets because they don't want to lose them. But as we walk down the hallway, our damage is getting worse. Our ceiling's getting blacker. Our soot line is growing, to almost a V. And here we come into the room of origin.
Oof.
And on this particular fire, the gentleman was asleep in his bed. He was asleep in his bed and he had an e-bike that was charging on this wall right here. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. I hope you can.
Yep.
All right. So he had an e-bike sitting right here charging next to his Peloton. He woke up, I think around 1 a.m. he said, and the e-bike was shooting flames out of it. Come to find out, if you're in investigations and you're an electrical engineer, you know that with lithium-ion batteries right now, which is a huge problem, the shooting flames is cells of the battery shooting out of the battery pack. So he had batteries shooting across the room, landing on the bed, landing on the floor. One actually imprinted into the wall in this area. And then we also have, that's our white clean burn spot right here. And I can zoom in on that.
Thank you.
This is exactly where the bike was sitting. So he woke up as an eyewitness and said, my bike was shooting flames. I ran out the door, shut the bedroom door, and I told my wife and kids. And, they vacated the house, fire department comes and puts it out. So I come, I always scan the fire scene first before I do anything. I don't move anything. That's why it's such a wreck in here. Before I clean anything out, we scan. That shows and preserves the evidence as how we found the fire scene when we got there. And, if we end up putting another company on notice, we can say, hey, sorry, we tried to get you guys here as soon as we could. If I can't get them on scene to do a joint scene exam with me quickly or within reason, or we have a hard time figuring out who it is, I can at least say, here's a scan of the building. This is how I found it. If you have questions, I'm happy to share the information with you. I'm a big proponent on investigators working together. We're in this for the same reason of figuring out our origin and cause. It's not my company suing your company. I'm just an investigator for the insurance company. So this is what we found. This is what I have. Here's the scan to prove it. And so that's what I do. I scan the whole building and the room of origin. If you see here, I actually scanned this particular room 5 times.
And Roger, there's a question that just came up in the chat applying to this room exactly. Jason was asking, is there a specific lighting source? Did you use any additional lighting in this room?
So yes, I do. I used to use one of those DeWalt dome lights. I think it's called a dome light, I guess. It takes a DeWalt battery. It's clunky. It's a square box. I used to put that under the tripod, and it was difficult. I actually was on the iGUIDE forums a couple years ago, and somebody had the same question, and they had come up with this Halo 360 light.
Those are great.
Yeah,
Those are great.
the best purchase I've made aside from this camera. It connects to the tripod with a regular mount. I don't know if you can see that. And I can put the link up for anyone who's interested. And it also has the little screw that goes into the bottom of the iGUIDE. So it sits literally on the iGUIDE independently, its own battery. And then I run the whole thing like this, sitting on a tripod. And this light will run, I think, about 6 hours on full power. There's different dimmed levels. I always run it on the highest power. Typically 6 hours. I can get enough scans in within 6 hours to be fine. The other example we show you today, I'll show you, it took me about 11 hours to do this one building, and it just required me to recharge the light and my iPad. But typically I'll run this 360 light all the time. It has different temperatures of light, the soft light, and then the higher temperature, like office style lighting. It works phenomenally. I don't bring any other additional lighting anymore. I just use this Halo light. And I modified the iGUIDE case to hold this light inside of it. It slides right into a slot, and then I charge this along with the camera, and I just run those 2 things along with the tripod. And this is exactly what you're seeing here is this light, the iGUIDE, and the tripod.
Yeah, that's great.
Answers his question.
Yeah.
I will put
Yeah.
a link for this. I got this from B&H Photo.
I think that's the one that's on our recommended accessory page. I mean, that's the reason it's there, because of people like yourself who found it and told us, and we basically agreed and said that's one of the best solutions to lighting for fire investigators that we found that works seamlessly with the tripod and camera.
Oh yeah, it's a game changer, and it's so much easier than carrying a dome light around with me everywhere I go, along with the iPad. So as far as lighting, yeah, that's the only two things I use. So getting back to this, like I said, I took 5 scans in this room. Was it excessive? Probably. But when you have a potential case, a fire that could be going to court someday, you want to be thorough. The iGUIDE works better with the most scans you can get, because that's how the laser inside of it takes measurements.
Right.
Or the more scans you do, the more accurate the laser will be. And the easier it is for the iGUIDE engineers to stitch together a blueprint and make the photos all seamlessly come together. I won't do small rooms like this bathroom to the right of this scan. Whoops, what did I just do? Oh, I went to the other scan. I won't scan little tiny bathrooms typically. It's just too hard. It doesn't benefit me anything unless that was a room of origin that I was concerned about. But as you look around, there's different views, and I could show this to a court and say, this is our room of origin. There's no doubt about it. It's quite clear.
Yeah.
There's no fire in the hallway. There's no fire in this bathroom. This bathroom is in good shape, considering. And the closet has clothes inside of it. I'm not, worried about that. But certainly this huge scorch mark on the wall is a big concern. In addition to my eyewitness statements of the battery on my bike was shooting flames. So that produces a blueprint. And with that, you can then, let's see, where's the button?
Yeah.
I can download the screenshots, the floor blueprints in metric or imperial, and I will provide this along with a link to these scans to the insurance company, the attorneys, any interested parties that need to see it. There's no sense in me having the other insurance investigator reinvent the wheel. If I already scanned this place, as long as the attorneys are okay with it, I'll share the information. It's not a secret. It's going to come out in court regardless if we go to court. So I might as well just make your life a little easier, and let's work together and get this cleared up. So the blueprints are here. When you download them, it'll have dimensions for every room. And then if you want to go deeper and take measurements of particular things, say for instance, you want to measure, whoops, let's see. I want to measure the distance. Oh, I want to go 1. This is always the, oh, my screen's messing up. There we go.
There you go. Probably the Zoom. Zoom always adds a little
Yeah.
trying to interact with it, so it can make it a little bit clunky.
If I want to, oops, normally, here we go. If I say I want to measure the distance of this window, I can go, all right, that's a 2'10" window, not to scale. We always put not to scale, but it's a close enough adaptation that we don't need to, go further or more in depth. Yeah. There's nothing to say, investigators, and I certainly will too. Certainly do your own blueprints, pen and paper or Apple Pencil and iPad of the room of origin, just to be sure. If you want to go super in depth, I want to know where every stud is, every outlet, which you should be, marking those kind of things. I will certainly do a secondary sketch just to be thorough and sure that I'm finding every outlet. I'm figuring out where all the branch wiring is going and how it's running through the room. Do that in conjunction with this, and you're going to have a very solid adaptation of a scene sketch for NFPA. Let me turn this off right here. Oops.
Can I ask you, Roger, how long do you think it took you to do this iGUIDE of this property here?
This particular house, no more than 30 minutes.
30
the
minutes.
longest part is literally just moving the tripod around and waiting for people to get out of my way if I want to take a photo. Or,
that could be tricky.
fire scenes are messy. They're They're uneven everywhere, so it's always more times just setting the tripod up so it doesn't tip over, or how many times I've hit the iGUIDE on the door jamb as I'm walking through the hallway holding a tripod because I'm standing on 2 feet of debris. That's the hardest part, is just doing that. But if you go to every room and you do 3-4 scans in every room, usually corners, I shoot from corners in, and then sometimes one in the middle to really tie it all in.
Mhm.
This building, 30 minutes, easy.
Okay.
It's very
That's-
fast.
That's probably a good segue into the next sample you have.
I
So
know.
Sure, yep.
we hear you got one that's a little bit bigger, and I'm sure people in this chat use it for, some residential, some might be commercial. So
Yep.
I would love to see this one. And I was just taking a peek before we joined this webinar.
Right. Yeah, this one is this is a building in Long Island also. This was a 6-story, how big is it? 4-story with a full underground basement parking garage.
Mhm.
A single tenant office caught fire. There's like 15 tenants in this building. Excuse me, mostly shipping companies for like overseas air shipments. We got called because we represented the office space that caught fire. Somebody represents I'm sorry, no, we represented the building. Somebody else represented the office space, the business that caught fire.
Okay.
So since I represented the building owners, I kind of have, I don't want to say carte blanche to go anywhere I need to in the building, but technically the insurance company owns the building in this scenario.
Mhm.
And I want to be thorough and scan the entire building. Is it overkill? It might be. But the insurance wants details. They like details. That's the kind of thing they look for. So this was a 4-story building with a full basement. I can show you the basement here. That was a guy working in the fire pump room. But actually, if you look right here in this reflection, here's the camera. There's the camera. There's the light underneath and my tripod. That's the whole setup, along with either your iPad or your iPhone. Sometimes I'll run an iPad to do the scans. Sometimes I'll run an iPhone if I'm feeling lazy and I don't feel like carrying the iPad around. Either will work with the iGUIDE app, which is really nice. And as we come through here, here's parking garage. I didn't do a lot of scans in the garage. There's not much to see, but the camera, measures all this for me and creates a really nice big empty blueprint.
Mhm.
So coming up to the first floor, and now this scan, like I said earlier, this scan took about 11 hours. It was more so just walking.
Yeah.
This place was a maze. Every office space had its own kitchen, lounge, or hangout area, employee lounge, staff area, whatnot. So it was just really time consuming figuring out where I was in the building. And as you can see, here's my iGUIDE box and then my tripod holder. And I just started walking through the building, scanning. I did end up running out of juice in the light and the iPad. The iGUIDE, I luckily had a second battery. I definitely recommend a second battery if you're going to be doing big scans or you're forgetful to charge the battery like I am sometimes. I swapped the battery out once, and then the iPad and the light I had to charge throughout the day as I went. But here it is. Office space, staff areas, utilities rooms.
Yeah.
And you can walk through here as you go. And you can see, a lot of this was kind of under construction, some of it was occupied. Whoops. And I've always found if you scan the building with the doors open, the laser has a better understanding that there's more there in that room to look at, and it builds the blueprint easier. So I try and make an effort of open all the windows or all the doors, get the light really good, and come up with a plan on how you're going to scan a building this size, because it's not easy. It definitely takes some thinking and planning, and so on this particular one, I didn't do outside scans with the camera. It was just too big of a building. I had the LIE running right next to us, so I just did photographs for that. But if we go up to the second floor, this is the second floor stairwell. And as you see, this is, if you guys were a jury right now, this is how I would be presenting this. I'd say, here's the stairwell of the second floor. Here we have, it's quite obvious that there's a barrier here because they're trying to keep the smoke and soot in the floor of origin. But as we walk through, here we have our soot lines. Here's our line of demarcation here. This is where our smoke and soot banks down. And we follow it back to our area of origin. So this is a floor of origin. We start with a building of origin, which is the whole building. We narrow it down to a floor of origin, the second floor. And here we work our way down the hallway. Oops. And I always try and take scans on corners because it lets me look, down multiple hallways. These are bathrooms.
Yeah.
And here we go. We walk down this hallway.
Yeah. It's almost like a good practice from what I hear a lot of our operators is just keeping that line of sight, right? Almost as you would view it as a person, make sure you go from one point to the next and it just simply connects itself, right?
Yes,
So
correct. Yeah, normally if I had their camera to do this, I would be snap, walk, 5-6 feet, snap a photo, walk 6-5 feet, snap another photo. This is way more forgiving. And it stitches everything together beautifully.
Mhm.
There are times when you may have to go in and adjust the software. Sometimes it gets confused, especially with the building this big, it may get confused which direction is pointing. The built-in compass in this works phenomenally. So I rarely have an issue, but every once in a while I have to recalibrate the compass and just remind it, where north is. And then it figures it out, which direction I'm pointing in. And those are all adjustments you can make on the iPhone or the iPad as you scan.
Yeah.
So I'm always, I do a scan, I have a general idea, and then I rotate the blueprint, the live blueprint as I go if needed.
Yeah.
So here's our space of origin, our business.
Mhm.
And
Can I ask, just when you're talking to a jury, like there must be a benefit, I'm assuming, as you're telling this story and you're walking them through, are they asking questions about different pieces of an element within this space? Are the lawyers looking for insights? How do you really double down and show them how these things happen?
sure, yeah, typically the jury they're not going to be saying anything. The attorney will be,
Okay.
asking all the questions.
Sure.
You'll have had a meeting with the attorney, I would hope, prior to the court to go over this stuff and present how you're going to present. And that way he can get his questions in line to make his case look good.
Yeah.
But certainly a lot of times, every time I've been in court, the attorney has said, do your thing and get me to the point of origin or the room of origin.
Right.
Typically the attorneys don't need to ask questions about how did you get to the room of origin. They'll just say, you're the expert, explain it to the jury, explain it to me.
Mhm.
And then once we get into this room of origin, I'll start asking details that we need to show and narrow it down to where our origin and cause was specifically.
Mhm.
On this particular one, this was a big fire. A lot of interested parties, a lot of attorneys, a lot of electrical engineers. There was mechanical engineers and investigators, pretty much all zeroing in on this area of origin, this specific space.
Yeah.
I won't go into details about that, but this is essentially my room of origin.
Yeah.
And the scan itself is not it'll be used to show point of origin, but
Mhm.
when you're getting more in depth to a localized point, whether it be a bad outlet or a faulty electronic device,
Mhm.
you're really going to be transitioning to a point and shoot digital SLR, something that you can really zoom in on, take very macro shots with, and typically any evidence you find in a situation like this will be pulled out within evidence, brought to a lab, and then
Yeah.
we'll tear it down and look at it at a much smaller level under microscope if we need to, or
Mhm.
magnification, and really document it that way. The
Mhm.
iGUIDE, in my opinion, works great for getting us to the point of origin, the area of origin. The digital SLR will switch to zooming in macro-wise.
Mhm.
But this paints the picture and builds the stage for the jury to get us to where we want to look closer.
And Roger, Jason had a question in the chat. I was actually wondering the same thing as well, because I had a feeling you would use a DSLR for point of origin. Do you ever tag those back in the iGUIDE, or does your jury process and for court proceedings, do you walk them through two separate, or do you ever have the need to take that DSLR, go back in and make it part of that one iGUIDE link?
I can't say I've actually, no, I haven't actually tagged anything into the iGUIDE as far as more in-depth point of origin photos. I'll typically just transition to then a PowerPoint and say, here's this desk. Next slide, here's a digital picture of the same desk to give you point of reference. And then here we are zooming in. Or I could zoom in and say, here's where I think it is. And then the next photo will be a close-up of everything in that area.
Yeah.
Right.
That's typically what I'll do and how I'll explain it to juries and attorneys. And I haven't had an issue with that yet. It's been fine. So, but you could certainly, if you wanted to tag photos within the iGUIDE itself, you could absolutely do that. And some guys might go as far as, tagging the blueprints with, here's evidence marker 1. This is where the general area was taken. And here's my measurements off of, the walls to show you, not to scale, within reason where it was. Typically for a building, a room this size, I won't often do very in-depth pen and paper blueprints just because it would take forever.
Yeah.
I'll typically transition back to the iGUIDE with the measurements, and then I'll get major measurements, like I'll measure where all the outlets are to show where the outlets are in comparison to where we think the point of origin is. But I won't be measuring things like where are the I-beams. That stuff doesn't really matter in this scenario.
Okay.
I don't want to say you won't do something every time because, again, every fire is a little bit different and the attorneys may be asking for a little different details, or the electrical engineer, might say, hey, let's try and show this detail a little more in depth. And, that's why we hold fire scenes sometimes for a little while, so we can, if we need to go back and get additional measurements or verify something, we'll do that.
It gives you time.
Exactly. Yep. We try not to hold a scene for too long, but this certainly helps us preserve the scene the way we found it. And I've had situations in the past where I get on scene, I do a scan, we try and identify interested parties, and it takes a couple weeks. I have one now, it's 2 months. I'm trying to identify interested parties. And, you go back and the scene's been altered. And you go, well, that's, stuff's missing or stuff's been changed. And I go, well, I have a digital document proving that this is how I found it when I arrived. And that's what I do with the iGUIDE primarily. So I can say, hey, there's potential evidence of spoliation here.
Yeah.
This is how I found it. And then the attorneys can figure out and decide how we're going to move forward, if we can move forward, or how we may move forward to deal with the situation of an altered fire scene. And it may not be a fire scene altered in the sense maliciously. It might just be, I've had it where cleanup companies come in and they're not thinking, or they haven't been relayed the information, and they will throw everything out. And that creates a subrogation potential now against the cleanup company, potentially. But I say, hey, this is how I found it, and this is how I just came back to it, a week or two later. We have an issue. We may not be able to go after a manufacturer, but you may have a case against a cleanup company now because my iGUIDE is way different than the way I found it now.
And it's been compromised.
Correct. Yep.
Wow. Okay. But I'm finding this really interesting. And
yeah, so this is a 53,000 square foot building, if I'm not mistaken, from the iGUIDE details.
And you can tell how much effort you put into creating that.
Yes.
Look at all these details it's captured here.
So here's all of our details. When you download the PDF, it'll have these measurements within every room. Now you could go back and change commercial to office 1, hangout area 2, whatever you wanted. I didn't care about that potentially on the first floor.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that too. I know probably our drafters for the main fire area, the point of origin, it probably shows up every time for you as unfinished. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you normally do to show that or label that, or do you often just leave that and then
No, I kind of just let the drafters do their thing. I haven't had an issue yet. And I can always go back, the beauty of it is I can always go back and say, hey, can you guys relabel this to area of origin or room of origin if I need to? I can do it myself.
Yeah.
The label that it shows really isn't gonna probably come up in court. At least it hasn't come up for me. And I can easily explain, why it's labeled unfinished. It's a burnt out hole, and the drafters and the software is probably just a little not confused, but they're just not going to label it something that they can't tell easily what it is.
Right.
And that's totally fine. It's not a big deal. And like I said, if you wanted to go back and change it, you certainly could, but I haven't had the reason to do that yet. But yeah, so this is about 53, I didn't even look, 53,000 square feet.
I think we might have changed something there so it doesn't show the
Oh, okay, that's fine.
total square footage. Sorry about that.
That's all right. No. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it's like 53,000 and change. But and then this link, this randomized link, I always change my links from typically the last part will be the address, and then I will randomize it and then lock it so that only the people I give permission to access that link, either access if you own the link or have the link, or I can do email access only. Typically, I'll just send them the randomized link because most people aren't going to figure out the last part of the URL to figure it out. And then they're free to share, the attorneys are free to share that with whomever they want. And if I need to renew it, typically it stays live on the iGUIDE website for about a year. And then you'll get emails, giving a countdown. Hey, it's going to go offline in 30 days or a week. Do you want to renew the link? And if I need to for court purposes, I'll renew it. And if not, I'll just let it go dormant and then reactivate it like I did the single family house I showed you earlier. I reactivated that the other day for the presentation because that fire is done and closed out.
And in terms of the offline links, do you often download them to share with people, or is it always the online link and you change that a little bit as well?
Typically I'll do the online link only just because it's interactive. If the attorneys want to download the blueprints, they're welcome to. And then, like I said, I'll share this, as long as the attorneys and the insurance companies are okay with it, I'll share the link with the opposing party's investigator. Typically, I know who it is. We typically have worked together on opposite sides of the fire scene, obviously, but worked together many times on fire scenes opposite of each other. And it just makes our lives easier if we share this kind of information together. But certainly that's something you need to verify with the attorneys. Sometimes the attorneys are just like, hey, let them do their legwork and we'll do ours. But more often than not, this kind of information we're sharing because it's going to come out in court anyway. So it's just kind of a gentleman's agreement to, hey, if you've done a scan, just shoot me the scan or at least the blueprints with the measurements to make his life a little easier. Or he may not have a camera to do this kind of detailed work.
Right.
Yeah, and just another call out on that note too. So I mean, for the longest time, and since I've done a webinar, the iGUIDE in the portal when you're creating it has always required a property address, and then you could make a copy after. One of the new things we just did update again because of your guys' requests is you can disable the address and put in any property number, reference number, claim number, anything like that, making it kind of a little bit protected and not based on a specific address if you need to as well. So, I mean, what Roger did in this link, and as you guys can see in the link there, you can always make a copy and the link will change as well. But on the initial step, you can do that too.
Absolutely.
Correct. Yeah, that is a big part too, because I even, was getting curious and I would type in like youriGuide.com/ and then just type in a random address. And once I pulled one up from a realtor. And, the realtor used just the address for realtor.com or whatever those websites are for buying houses. So if you're doing insurance work, especially investigation work, you definitely want to be sure to change the URL and lock it. Just until the attorneys tell you otherwise to share the link, because it's technically the insurance company's property at this point.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
That's a really great tip.
Yeah.
Roger, I know we're getting close. We just have about 10 minutes left in
Sure.
our conversation, but there were two things that you brought up when we chatted just before our webinar, and one was about the processing. So you've gone through and captured this property. You've talked about some of the deliverables, but like, I'd love for you to share how your experience is in terms of getting a return of the files. And like, also, one of the things you talked about was the future of where you see it going. And we talked a little bit about ESX. You files. Sorry, I don't know why it's catching me. I talk about it all every day, but and how that's going to change the future of your business. So I'd just love to talk, about those two key points, because I thought really that was interesting for me to think about how you wanted to expand your business and then use the technology to grow.
Sure. Yeah. I don't personally use ESX files or DWG files, which you guys, were teaching me about the other day. But I have gotten in the last couple of years requests from insurance companies to provide them an ESX file or a DWG file. What I start out with telling insurance companies when I do a fire investigation for them is they don't have a choice to not get an iGUIDE scan of a building. It's just my business's operating procedure that we're scanning the building for our own protection, documentation purposes and whatnot. I've never had anyone complain about scanning a building. They usually love it. I've yet to have anyone say, "Oh, let's save them money on scanning a building." But what I will get is they'll come back and say, "Hey, that's a really great scan. Does that come in a ESX or DWG file?" And I'll say, "Yeah, it does." And I always provide one for them if they want it. Sometimes they'll come and do their own scan with just the Theta camera itself, but they're missing a lot of the data points that the iGUIDE does with the laser built in. So I will provide ESX or DWG files, no problem if they want it. It's a click of a box for me. It's not like it's extra work, and it just helps them. And it's another service that I can provide to the insurance carrier. When I feel bad that I'm spending their money on electrical engineers and mechanical engineers, it's like I'm giving them something back to make their lives a little easier, that I'm providing a file this big, for maybe an office building this big, for their engineers and CAD people to use and utilize and whatnot. So there is an extra charge to create an ESX or DWG file, but it's negligible considering the grand scheme of the total cost. It's, if anything, it just helps them, and it is another thing that my company can provide to them to make us more marketable and helpful any way we can. I think I answered your question.
Great, yeah. And have you tried, I mean, this is a bit of a hot topic. I know we talked about this, but other technology in the industry, like we talked about some of the otother things that you had tried.
Yeah.
In comparison, like, where do you see that? How do you
Sure. We've talked about the Matterport. It's a good camera. It's fine. Their name is synonymous with this technology, unfortunately. So I'll get calls from attorneys and say, "Hey, can you Matterport this fire scene?" And I go, "Well, Matterport's a company. It's not the technology." And I've used it. I've seen it used. I've never owned one personally. We looked into buying one years ago, and the cost was a huge turnoff for us. Primarily because you don't own the data. Matterport owns it. You pay a storage fee, a yearly storage fee. I can't remember what the cost is off the top of my head, but it's expensive. Unless you're a major insurance investigation firm, national one, like, there's lots of them out there. It doesn't have a cost benefit to us to have Matterport store these kind of scans for years. Fire scenes, they could take years to go to court for subrogation purposes. And that's a charge. Granted, we may not be billing. You know, we may not be paying that charge. We may bill the insurance carrier, but it's still a charge to the insurance carrier that we're trying to help them not have to do that. So iGUIDE, you know, you own the data. I keep scans on my server here in the office, and then we have our scans on the iGUIDE website. You know, some lay dormant for a couple of years now. And then I'll reactivate them if we need to for any reason. And if I need to re-upload them, I have the hard copies. Excuse me, I have the hard copies on my servers, and we can recreate this same blueprint 2 years, 5 years from now. And it's, I mean, a fraction of the cost compared to Matterport and the other ones out there. There's another brand, I can't remember the name. I saw it at a trade show a couple months ago.
Okay.
And it was expensive, very expensive.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So with this system, you buy the camera and then you pay just the processing fees to make it look pretty and have blueprints and make it interactive.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're coming on time, folks, and we've just got a few minutes left with Roger. Is there any additional questions folks have just about his processes or his experience or otherwise that we can share that you might find valuable? The conversation's been pretty chatty. It looks like you guys are networking and connecting with each other. And Roger, we do have a request for you to reach out to one of the that joined us today. So I'm going to share their information.
Sure.
It's giving me permission. And then Jordan, anything you want to add? Because I know this has been an awesome conversation. I learned a lot just about fire investigations. I know we only had a couple of moments and a few brief emails in terms of getting ready for today. I really appreciate your time, Roger. It's been a fantastic conversation. Jordan, do you have anything that you want to add as well? I think.
No, I mean, Roger's pretty much covered it all. It's great to hear from you firsthand. I know I only do maybe 1 or 2 fire investigation trade shows a year and really get to hear from people right directly in your industry. So it's great to hear from you. Thank you again for joining. I think we've got a few questions rolling in the chat.
Sure.
Maybe we can do a couple live ones here that way. And I apologize if we haven't got to all of you. If there are questions, Charlene and I will go through them and answer some of you via email as well.
Yeah, you can put my email if anyone wants to email me directly.
Okay, so Justin had a question about the cleaning decon process for the camera equipment. So
Sure.
he had issues with his DSLR and
Yes.
for a while with the soot and the smoke and otherwise. So he's wondering a little bit about maintenance.
Yeah, the DSLRs, like everyone knows, you know, there's a lot of nooks and crannies. I don't even let my own kids play with my digital SLR from fire scenes because it's messy. As far as PPE goes, you know, you should be wearing a respirator and gloves and whatnot. If it's an asbestos positive scene, we're obviously in Tyvek. But as far as the camera goes, I'm wiping it down with just wipes. You can't submerge it by any means, but simple wipes, baby wipes or Clorox wipes. The camera is super durable. The laser's all encased inside of a plastic housing. So here's the laser here. It's all in a plastic housing, so you can't actually touch it, but you can hear it spinning. But this one, yeah, I just wipe it down with wipes, and then those blue disposable wipes you buy at like Lowe's. And that's really it. There's not much to it. The whole thing is very encapsulated and all in one piece, so to speak. You may not get some soot out of the really tight nooks and crannies, like where the camera sits inside of the base. But it's pretty tight seal, and like anything you use in a fire scene, I wouldn't be playing, you know, letting your loved ones play with it because it's still a dirty piece of equipment.
Yeah, the lens is probably the most sensitive thing. I know we do design the cores pretty durable. Have you ever needed to take out that top plate and kind of clean underneath there? I mean, I guess that depends on how many fires you go through and how many scenes you do.
No, I haven't had any issues. Like I said, the only issue I have is when I'm carrying this on a tripod and I hit it above a door jamb above me. You know, it comes with the cover, but I'm just trying to be mobile and do a scan as fast as as fast and thoroughly as I can, so to speak.
And I have another question from Tim. He wanted to also ask about 3D models and Revit, if you use that for AutoCAD. I'm going to say, just by the look on your face, that's a no.
I just got AutoCAD 2 weeks ago because I was really curious using AutoCAD
Yeah.
with one of our files just to play with it. I'm not an engineer or a CAD person by any means, but I love computers and technology. So I bought AutoCAD to play with it. And I haven't done it yet, but I am not familiar with Revit. I will certainly look at it and look into it, but AutoCAD may be above my knowledge and experience, but I'm going to try on YouTube and play around with it and see if I can utilize it for investigation purposes in any way.
And that is a file type we offer if you do end up encountering any engineers that, need that file. So our drafters can do that. So you're not, pulling out hair trying to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, does iGUIDE do Revit? What's a Revit file extension? Is that a DWG file also? I don't even know.
No, Revit's got its own file type. I think it stands RVT is the acronym for it.
Okay.
That's another file type we offer, fairly new, I think within the last 6 months or so.
Yeah.
All right.
That's another extension of our architecture, engineering, construction packages that we have as well.
Yeah, so you're diving into more of a 3D model space there, where you may use that for interior design, construction, retrofit, remodeling, those types of purposes. It would be probably, I would say, maybe the next step up to a DWG. Like you may use a DWG for getting your permits and putting all of those pieces in place or rebuild. And then when you get into the Revit files, you're doing more advanced modeling and building things out to sort of scope that for maybe a larger property or more detailed commercial residential.
Cool. I just saw another question, sorry to interrupt, from Jason Taylor about building collapse. How, I've worked buildings where there have been a collapse. How do you document the area that you can't get into? Great question. I've had a couple fires where the floors will have collapsed or partial floors have collapsed. It's one of those things where I just try and scan as much as I can. The software may get confused if you have a floor that's, leaning down from the second floor to the first floor. It may throw off the measurements as far as the laser goes and get confused. It's one of those things where if the blueprint doesn't work out really well for those type of scenarios, it's not the end of the world. You still have a digital, 360 scan of the building, and you can relay the fire scene as you found it with the 3D scan. But the blueprint may not be just, it may be off, and that's fine. What I would say is, in addition to the iGUIDE scanning that kind of scenario or situation, again, use your digital SLR, snap as many more photos as you may need. I've seen some guys say like they'll take the camera itself and stick it, in holes to take photos. I've never done that. I don't foresee the reason. If I really need to get into a collapsed area that badly, then I'm going to be calling the insurance company and saying, hey, we need to bring an engineer in here to shore up this floor, make it safe, get in where we need to maybe get in to get closer photos and documentation purposes. But just scan it as best you can, document it as you found it. No one's going to fault you for not going into a collapsed area and getting a 360 model of it. In the long run, it's, you don't want to get hurt or killed for a photo that we, may not really need or whatnot. So
that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a really great question. Thanks for asking that.
Sure.
Yeah. And your answer was.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are at 3:05.
Yeah.
Which I hate ending it when we have great questions coming in.
Right.
But I want to be respectful of your time, Roger. I know that,
Oh, that's fine.
do
this again anytime. I can talk about this all the time. I love this stuff.
That's what makes you such a great host. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an incredible experience.
Sure.
I've learned a ton. I'm sure Jordan, you would probably say the same.
Oh, 100%.
I think I can speak for both of us. We're so grateful to have you today. I will share with Roger's permission. I know some people have reached out with requests for contact in the chat.
Yeah, get my email. That's fine.
I'll share that out. I'll share your LinkedIn profile, Roger. That's
Sure, yeah.
for people to connect with you professionally, and then that's a great way to network and also stay in contact.
Sure.
And then if you have any additional questions, folks, I'm going to send out an email tomorrow. I'll capture answers and resources to all the questions that we've had today. And then as well with Roger's information. And if there's anything else that you'd like or you need that we didn't provide in that, just respond. And I'm always happy to share that with you as well. So
Great.
thanks so much for joining us today, guys. I hope you had as much fun as we did. That was a great conversation. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to hearing from you again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Roger, especially, thank you for your time as well. I know myself, Charlene, and everyone here is grateful to hear from you.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you very much for having me. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Awesome.
Have a good
Take
day,
care, guys.
everyone.
Everybody have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.